Things really do go bump in the night. Sometimes they're loose pipes or perhaps even loose floorboards. Maybe a raccoon has gotten into your attic and rattling around at night. But sometimes it's not so easy to diagnose the problem. And when that time comes, you want to lean on the experts for answers. Things that go bump in the night. Misty apparitions, dark, murky shapes taking form in the corner of your room, doors opening and shutting slowly. What's behind these mysteries? Tonight, we're going to talk about this and so much more. There's one guy on the top of my list that I'd want to come ghost bust my house. Well, he doesn't actually bust the ghosts. He used to do that to perpetrators. Now, he just tries to find the answers and bring those answers to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the company of ghosts tonight. Steve Gonsalves joins us next right here on the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is my Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. You won't know. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Good evening, my little darklings, and thank you so much for joining me here this evening. For all of you that I just had a chance to hang with in Wabasha, Minnesota at the Anderson House, new listeners and old listeners alike, thank you for joining us here this evening. I promised we had a great guest tonight, and I've held up my end of the bargain. Brand new book out and about. As a matter of fact, if you're going to be at Michigan Paracon, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to see this guy and be able to get a copy of the book, A Life with Ghosts. Steve Gonsalves from the TV show Ghost Hunters, Ghost Nation, Ghost Hunters Academy, and Cops Unplugged. I made up one of those. I'm not sure which one. Steve, it is so good to have you back, buddy. Good to see you.
Hey, Dave. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. I appreciate it. I'm going to warn you. I know you're a cat guy.
Yeah.
And I, as well, am a cat guy. I wasn't, but for some reason, 5 of them have found their way into my house. So now I'm apparently a crazy cat guy. And the new one keeps prowling the perimeter of the room. So at any given time, he may pounce. And I'm just going to fair warn you, there have been a few shrieks lately as I don't see him coming and suddenly he's up behind my shoulder or biting me in the butt. So I don't want you to be taken off guard, but I know he's skulking somewhere nearby. Dude, I cannot believe it has been almost 20 years since Ghost Hunters first debuted on Sci-Fi Channel, and now people can find it on Discovery and Max, the streaming service. Does it feel like it's been that long for you, or does it just seem like 5 or 6 years have rolled by?
It feels like it's been just a few years. Yeah, it went by really quick. But sometimes I'll think of the earlier days and it seems a little murky. And then I go, oh, maybe it does seem like it's been quite some time. But, all those sayings when you heard when you were younger, all these things about Father Time, and when you get older, you realize, oh, it's all true.
Yeah, it comes flying a lot quicker. You, though, unlike me, you continue to look younger, and I'm aging for you, I believe, which is highly unfair, Steve. That was not the agreement I made when I did my very first paranormal conference with you back in 2006?
Yeah, it was back in 2006, and we may even have done an event before that. I don't know when that one at the hotel was.
No, that was I just launched my original radio show on January 1st, 2006. You and the guys from TAPS all came rolling onto the show about once a month to keep me company. And somewhere in there, I think around an August, September timeline, we did a small event in Warwick, Rhode Island, where we brought a bunch of the fans of Ghost Hunters together and a bunch of fans from my podcast and radio show. And we went out there and investigated and got a chance to visit TAPS headquarters at the time, and a remarkable time. And it was so fun. I still love that of all the events I've done, And I've been at massive events. That was a small, fun event. I mean, there was, what, like 40, 50 people, I think we had come to that because the hotel and TAPS headquarters couldn't take more than that at the
Right.
time.
Yeah,
But
I remember it.
we had a pretty remarkable time in that hotel. It was a haunted hotel that opened up some of the, do you remember it was like a Hampton Inn or something, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was pretty close to the TAPS office. It may have been like a Fairfield Inn in Suites
That's
or
what it
something
was.
like that.
Yes.
Uh, I don't
The
know how
last
they
place
pulled that.
the last place you would think that they would be open to allowing us to ghost hunt, and I remember booking the event, and they're like, "Oh, uh, are you into the ghosts, like that ghost hunter show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they're gonna come with me, and we'll do a signing at that." And they're like, "Oh, well, we've got a couple of haunted rooms. Do you want me to hold them for you so you guys can investigate here?" And it was just like,
Yeah.
yes, let's do that. So we ended up creating a ghost hunt and had a great time. And do you remember the two husbands? I love the fact that we had people broken up on two different floors, and it was you and Paula Donovan as my team leads. Paula was on the very early seasons of Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi Channel, and you guys were leading the ghost hunts. Everybody ended up coming over to hang out and do an autograph signing and meet and greet and photos. It was great. But when we broke up for the ghost hunt that night, I thought what was fascinating is the group one was upstairs, and about 20, 30 minutes into the ghost hunt, this guy comes down rubbing his throat. He's really ill at ease, very uncomfortable. And I go, "Oh, where's your group?" He goes, I had to leave. I don't know what's going on. I almost felt like I was choking. I couldn't be in that room. And then I said, "Well, just stay here." And then they swapped out the next group, and the next group went up to that room, and the guy came down, another husband, and he's doing the same thing and rubbing his throat. And he's like, "I don't, maybe there's black mold or something in that room." And it's a brand new hotel. I'm like, I doubt that's the case. And he goes, "Man, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was choking." And I remember texting, I'm like, "Steve, maybe you should come down to the lobby. I've got two separate men from two parts of the investigation that just showed up with an issue. And you came down. The night clerk overheard and then said, 'What room number are you in?' And then went on to tell us the story that a man had taken his own life in that room by taking a razor to his own throat, and then
Ooh.
panicked in the last second to call for help. And that night clerk was the one that had taken the call that night. And then the guy collapsed.
Wow.
And you and I were just standing there completely dumbfounded. Two separate men, two different groups, had the exact same experience. And then the best moment of the night was when the wives came down to the lobby looking for their husbands. And you and I are like, "Oh, let us tell you what's happening." And we get done, and these two women are fuming. And we're like, what's wrong? And they were both like, "This was our trip. We're the one that like the ghost
Oh.
hunters. Well, they didn't even want to be here, and they get to have the experience." And you just looked at me and he goes, Are they being serious right now?" And I go, "I think so." So these two, and I looked at her and I go, Are you really upset that you weren't feeling like you were choking to death in that room?" She goes, "Yeah, why does he get to have all the fun?" you, you shook your head and goes, "I'm gonna go back up to the ghost hunt," and left. It was one of the funniest moments I've ever had at one of these events. It's just so bizarre.
Oh, well, you get to meet a lot of different people at these events, and there are so many fun stories. But by
Yeah.
and large, they're so fun, and everybody's just wants to have a good time. But the husbands who weren't even fans stole their
Stole the
thunder.
light. Yeah.
Yeah, they stole it.
The ghosts are probably laughing still about that. You've got a brand new book, A Life with Ghosts: True, Terrifying, and Insightful Tales from My Favorite Haunts. And boy, this is what, 19 years coming to finally put things down on paper. Was it a shock when you start writing the book and start processing these stories and revisiting these moments throughout your history?
Yeah, it was actually really awesome. The research that went in, because I would know of certain things and remember things, but then
Mhm.
I'd really have to go back and look through notebooks, and of course, look back through all kinds of emails and notes, and look up all the history all over again. And all of that was super fun, quite honestly. It was like going down memory lane in the best way. The research history part was a bit tedious, because you really want to be quite factual, with that stuff. But everything else was just super fun in terms of revisiting all of those cases, and not just cases that you know have been prominently on Ghost Hunters or any of the shows. I just looked at a career, and not a career, but a time in the field as a whole.
Hmm.
Luckily for us, most of them were documented on television, so lucky in that way. But I do visit some cases that were never televised, so that's also quite fun to think about and relive.
Is
Talk
it
about feeling
strange to
old.
go back? Right. Is it strange to go back and watch early seasons of Ghost Hunters, I'm sorry, of Ghost Hunters and see yourself investigate? It's probably even weirder to go back and watch Ghost Adventures and not even see yourself on any of the episodes. But
Where am
uh
I?
is Zach blocking me? I can't. Where am I in this one? But
Oh,
when you're going back, is it bizarre to revisit those moments and see you? And that wasn't the beginning of your paranormal career. We'll just use that title for what it is. But that wasn't the beginning. You'd been investigating long before that. But this, as you said, was just documented. This is a video scrapbook that contains insights and views and expressions at that moment during those times.
yep, absolutely. The to have a all of a sudden a television show that really digs in deep, and wants to document everything you do, and that a lot of people are going to see it. It was definitely a different and quite awesome experience. But yeah, I was investigating long before that. Jay and I connected in the '90s, and Ghost Hunters came about 2004. But I want to say I've known Jay since '95, maybe, and then we started investigating together all the time. '97, '98. It was Rhode Island Paranormal. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, so it's been a long time. And of course, I had my own team, New England Paranormal, for quite some time. And I think when we first chatted, that team was still. And there's a few investigators and early ghost hunters that came from that team.
Hmm.
And super fun to think about that intertwining sort of road. And you've been there since the very beginning of season 2, 2005. Like, you started talking to us and saying, guys, I've been in the paranormal for a long time, and this is really cool to see. Yeah, it's been a long time, but an awesome time.
No doubt. When you're going back and looking at the cases that got you really drawn into the paranormal in the beginning, again, before the fanfare of all the TV projects and programs that are out there, were people less forthcoming with information about what was going on? Did they seem almost embarrassed or shy when they got to the point of calling you? It was that, like, I got to talk to somebody, but were they hard to get information from?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Even season 1 of Ghost Hunters, 2004, it was a little difficult to convince people that we would, do things in a non-sensationalized way, because nobody wanted in the beginning, when Jay and Grant and I were talking about the possibility of a TV show. One thing that we all said was, gosh, uh, how could we do it? We can't bring, nobody wants anybody to know their house is haunted. So we actually, we're a bit shy to do TV for a while. I remember Jay saying, hey, I don't think this is right for us right now, and moving on from it. But then eventually we went for it. But um, uh, luckily now it's almost like your house may be worth more if it's haunted in some
Right.
cases. But back then, in the '90s and the '80s and the late '90s, especially early 2000s, you were still the creep on the block if your house was haunted. That was the house that people kind of, and even if you talked about it to people, you have to know who you're talking about, because you would,
Right.
really, you've
Mhm.
been there. What are you guys talking about? Ghosts, nerds.
Right.
You believe in that stuff? Get out of here. But we're very fortunate now that we can talk about it and do it and have fun with it, and I think that's super cool.
Again, his new book is out. Well, his first book, A Life with Ghosts. And one of our listeners throws this out to you. Steve should make an audiobook. His voice is so calming. Can you make that happen for her right now,
Oh,
Steve?
boom. Yes, tomorrow. Just go. It will be available on Audible, and I did the narration. Yeah. So yeah,
Awesome.
I did one. This one.
That's
But
awesome.
thank you.
You mean you didn't do the audible version of Zach's book? I'm confused by
Oh,
all of
if you asked me, I would. Oh
the
God.
link for Steve's book, hardcover and the audible version, is on tonight's program guide. Just click the book link that we have up. It'll take you to the page, and you can choose if you want soft cover, hardcover, audio book. If you'd like to have Steve come over to your house and read it to you, I think all the options are there.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm too premature on that one. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
start right now. Introduction.
You're going to be out at Michigan Paracon this coming week. You'll have copies of the book you'll be signing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll be at Michigan Paracon this coming weekend. It's the weekend of like the 25th, I think. And actually tomorrow I'll be in Ridgewood, New Jersey, at a place
Awesome.
called Bookends. That's going to be fun. And doing a signing for something like this is really fun because people they're really interested in the individual stories. They really want to know all of the nitty gritty, but it's interesting to see. It's pretty cool.
Good. Well, let's go back into the beginnings of this. When you were going in, obviously, there were some fantastic investigators out there: Ed and Lorraine Warren, Dr. Hans Holzer, Dr. William Roll, just to name a few, that were out there. Dr. Barry Taff, Lloyd Auerbach, Professor Lloyd Auerbach. We've had a chance to work with a lot of these people at conventions and see them from time to time. But their stuff, as good as it was and featured in books, not many people knew that they could go to them to learn, or that there were opportunities for them to study and become paranormal investigators themselves. This was something you took advantage of, certainly, and talked to a lot of the experts while you were out there doing this to get insights. How accessible were these names to you when you began your career doing this?
That's a good question. In the beginning, I was very lucky in the respect that uh, I was a fan of, for instance, the Warrens. I
Hmm.
would go to see them speak, and they would have little video presentations and talk about it. It was very intimate. Back then the paranormal wasn't what it is now, so it's not like there wasn't 400 people, in a ballroom. There was 40 people, with 3 rows of chairs or something. It was very a much more intimate experience. So you could get a lot of one-on-one conversation. And with the Warrens, um, went to see them speak. And then at the end of it, they were like, "Hey, we're going to Union Graveyard. You want to come with us, Union Cemetery?" And me and my buddy were like, "Do we want to? Are you kidding me?" And then, fast forward a few years later, I was an investigator. I was probably 20 years old, a young fella, and I didn't know where to go with this case. It was a haunted person, and I had become friendly enough with Ed and Lorraine that they gave me the number to their research society, and I called them, and they called me back, and that's when I really started talking to John Zaffis. So when I was 20, I really connected with John for a bit, not forever, but for a brief moment of time, and I worked with them on a case or two or three cases. It was awesome and so fun. I got a very fortunate opportunity to work with Dr. William G. Roll. That was awesome.
Mhm.
That was at the Rhine Research Center, and then at a haunted mansion nearby. And that was amazing. And thanks to you, I got to uh, be part of an interview with Lloyd Auerbach, and that was to me was, his book ESP, and I talk about it in my book, really changed my life. And that was awesome. But if it wasn't honestly for Jay either, Jay is the one who asked me if I wanted to go to Ryan Research Center do a talk there. They were looking for
Mhm.
speakers on the topic of paranormal study, ghosts specifically, And I said, "Yeah, man, of course, thank you. I'd love to." And I went down there, and that's when Dr. Roll was there and was like, "Maybe you know my work." I was like, "Do I know?" And he came. Yeah, it was. He came for 2 days in a row and sat in my whole talk, and we connected. And then, like I said, we went to 2 nights in a row to this haunted mansion and investigated together. It was really cool.
What can you tell us? I mean, if you don't mind dipping into a little bit about that, getting a chance to work with one of your, um, idols is always such a term that's used so loosely, but somebody that you really looked up to in the field, and then to be boots on the ground next to them in an investigation at a haunted mansion. Are you trying to just be quiet and watch the master do his work, or are you just, I'm going to do what I do and give me advice and tips here, Dr. Roll? Well, how did that go for you?
Yeah, I was, a bit nervous. He was a very nice, but he was an astute fella in the respect that
Hmm.
that he was a proper older gentleman, and you couldn't really be too wild around him. He had a very
Right.
focused attitude, but he was so sweet and awesome and fun, and really wanted to impart his knowledge on other people. And I knew of his theory, so I was really excited to really learn from him with all the all of his research and to telephonic sounds and all of that, and just really fascinating and groundbreaking when it comes to the EMF work that everybody does. Really, may have even pioneered that from the beginning. Really awesome work from him.
Were you lucky enough while investigating with him to have paranormal phenomena take place?
No, no. There was one thing that I do remember. It sounded like something sliding upstairs on like there was a runner up a hallway, and it sounded like something sliding on a rug, and that's the only rug that was up there. But we couldn't tell either way, and he was very gadget, very um, gadget focused, and if his gadgetry didn't pick anything up, he wasn't quite interested. But we mostly focused on how to discern different energies in the environment, and how to maybe pinpoint patterns to see if we could figure out where certain ranges and frequencies were when something did happen, as opposed to microwaves or radiation, that sort of thing.
And then you had a chance to work, as you said, for 2 or 3 cases with Ed and Lorraine Warren. How radically different was that from working with Dr. Roll?
Well, it was more in depth in the sense that I got to see how they really worked with a client. Um, uh, I had met John Zaffis when I was 14 at a talk, just saying hello as a fan of his work and the Warrens. And for anybody who may not know, John Zaffis is their nephew. And so, quite honestly, to you know, fast forward, 6 years then seems like an eternity now. It doesn't
Mhm.
sound like very long, but fast forward 6 years, and I'm talking to John Zaffis, about a case, and he's taking me seriously, as an investigator, and um, then he says, "Okay, stand by the phone." 2 hours later, I get a call back. It's Ed, Ed Warren, Steve. Yeah, this is Ed Warren. What? And it was very much like that. But then we talked for about an hour on the phone. Him and Lorraine were just asking questions about the case, and why I had thought that maybe my time with it was maybe over. And then at the end, they said, "Hey, all right, we're gonna have John call you back," and John called me back, and we set it up. And then John was like, "Hey, all right, let's meet up." And then like, "Oh, I get to be a part of it too," like this, and it was awesome. And then to see how they really cared for, the really helping, whether they got an answer, whether they thought it was a ghost or not. They were very, the Warrens, they loved or not loved, but they were really felt strongly about different types of poltergeist activity. So they
Mhm.
thought maybe something like that was part of it, because it was a haunted person and not a haunted place. And that was really intriguing to them. And then they took the case over, and but it was really, really cool. And then, to fast forward and be able to, you know, hug John Zaffis when I see him, and he calls me his, distant son, and we talk and laugh, and it's really quite awesome. And I've been lucky with all of that. Even people I work closely with, like Jason. He was someone reached out
Mhm.
to, and he was like, "You live too far away." Oh no. So then when I started being able to actually work with him, I was like, this is the guy. Like, and he sort of imparted that disproving philosophy on him and Grant onto me. Although I did a little bit, I didn't think everything was a ghost. I did try to look, but I would go to him with some things. He'd be like, let's really look a bit deeper. And then I would find out, like, oh, okay, I guess the light can bounce in,
Right.
800 different ways. But maybe if he didn't impart that on me, I would be a little more accepting. So I appreciate that. And yeah, very fortunate to have influential people that I'm, working with still.
We've got a question from the audience here. Oh, that's not a question. That's a nice comment. Thank you, Mark. Where did it go? Here we are. Squeam Queen says, what conclusions, if any, have you arrived at about the afterlife, residual energy of those who've passed on, etc.? Or is this all still just a learning process for you?
Oh, it's a great question. I'd say, honestly, probably both. I think it's still a learning process, but I think I do have some thoughts. I firmly, it's not a fact, obviously. I mean, it is a fact that energy can be harbored through some catalyst and played back. I've had physicists tell me that directly. We know that you can put energy into a rock. You can heat up a rock, and an hour later pick it up, and it's still warm. That's transference
Mhm.
of energy. That's thermal energy. So it is possible. We know that. So that makes me believe in residual haunting a bit, and think that what we're experiencing there is quite legitimate. But that to me is a little awesome and a little sad. It's awesome because it's history. It's there. It's in the environment. It's so cool. But it's sad because that doesn't mean there's anything after this. That could have just be imprinted in the environment. Things with a conscious, though, and a thought and an intelligence, that is intriguing, and we see evidence of that as well. But does that mean it's a humanly spirit that of somebody who had passed and has come back or stayed here for some reason? I don't know if anybody truly knows. I'd like to know. Some people believe that it could be interdimensional, and most physicists that I've talked to think that that's actually quite possible.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe that could explain some of these vortex situations that people claim to experience. Who knows? But very, very interesting and fascinating to ponder. I don't think I have the answer, and I'm not sure anybody certainly does. Um, but I hope we get there. I do. It'd be super cool.
My son, Damien, wants the answer, Steve, and he knows if there's anybody he can lean on for the truth, it's you. Why are closets so haunted, Steve? Why? How did he accidentally tear a portal in there by throwing all of his toys in? He doesn't know why it happens.
He might have. There are a lot of you've seen all those movies, Monster in the Closet, House, the all these monsters, they come from the closet. There's
That's
literally a
right.
movie, Monster in the Closet.
Right.
So there is something. Look at Poltergeist.
Mhm.
That crazy mouth. That's talk about a portal or a vortex. Oh, excuse me. Um, so I don't blame your son. I don't really care for closets either.
It does seem weird though that like you've got hot spots. All right, we can maybe attribute the basement to the fact that there's pipes running, there's water, there's electricity. It's cooler, it's underground. Maybe there is a more conducive environment for a haunting. Attics, maybe again because of the wiring, because of the structure, that could lend itself either to natural phenomena appearing supernatural. But when it comes to closets, so many people have stories of seeing things in their closets, closet doors opening and shutting on their own. And then we talk about things like vortices and portals. And I think that term sometimes gets thrown around a little too loosely. But if I were to believe it, every fourth person I've ever met has a portal in their closet. which means Monster Inc. was definitely on something. Disney Pixar has been trying to tell us all along. But why do you think that it's some of these smaller, confined areas that, I used to make a fort in my closet. I never felt scared or freaked out by it. But there are other people that are just like transfixed, adults and children alike, that will not enter that area.
Yeah, I personally probably think it has to do with if the light's not on in a closet, your eyes, they see to the wall, and then all of a sudden that closet is a kind of a dark void. Like I remember being a kid laying in bed and just looking in that closet and seeing swirls, and your brain starts doing things, and you got to close your eyes. But maybe it is some sort of vortex. Who knows? Can a portal exist? Maybe, but not to go science, but most physicists, astrophysicists, if that sort of thing did exist, it would work much like a wormhole or a black hole. And if anything, even a light wave or a sound wave were to go through it, it would collapse. So how could something enter through a port? It may be the same. I don't know. I have a hard time with it. But if you can believe that another dimension can come into this one, then maybe it's just through another mechanism besides what we think of as a portal. Maybe it is a portal, but just another sort of set of rules behind it that we just don't even think about.
All right, Damien, I'm sorry we still have no steadfast answers to why closets or under your bed are haunted. Daddy is trying to still figure this out. Uncle Steve, no help at all. He's just throwing more movies
Sorry,
to
Damien.
you should never watch. But we do have to take just a quick break. We'll be back. We've got more with Steve right after this. Hey, come on out. GalaxyCon Austin is just a week away, September 1st through the 3rd at the Austin Convention Center. You will see some of your favorite sci-fi and horror and action adventure stars, cartoon voices, throwback friends from the past, like the cast of Boy Meets World, and me. I'll be there. I'm part of their paranormal contingent, and I would love the opportunity to see you, hang out, and get a chance to talk with you. I'll be doing 3 different panels. As a matter of fact, I believe on Friday, I'll be doing a panel with a few of the other Paranormal 60 newscasters, Greg Lawson and Chachi. That's right. I will have both on hand. Saturday, I'll be talking with Greg Lawson and with Nikki Folsom, Michelle Welch about hauntings in and around Texas and answering your questions on how to deal with hauntings. And Sunday, we'll be doing another talk. I'll be joined with the Paranormal 60 News crew. We'll be sharing some of the weirdest paranormal news stories from around the world. Again, you can get information and tickets at galaxycon.com. That's galaxycon.com. Not too long after that, Phenomicon, we believe, is taking place September 6th through the 9th in Vernal, Utah. Phenomicon.net is the website to get tickets. You're not going to want to miss this, folks. Some of the leading experts on ufology, cryptozoology, paranormal, we're all going to be there on site together under one umbrella talking about high strangeness, and we'd love for you to join us. For you in the Great Lakes area, the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference is September 22nd through the 24th. Let me try that again. Words is hard, folks. At the old Glen Beulah School in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin. Jason Hawes will be there. Adam Berry's going to be there. Sarah Lemos will be on hand. This kid named Shane Pittman, I don't recognize him. Maybe he's from one of those paranormal TV shows. Oh, that's right. Holzer Files in 28 Days, Haunted. We also have Sherry D. Benedetti, Lyle Blackburn, Jeff Belanger, Richard Estep, Tobias Whalen, Chad Lewis, Barnaby Jones, Mike Huberty, and the list continues. And I will be on hand. Tickets for all of these amazing events and more can be found at darknessevents.com. And for Halloween weekend, join me at the Haunted Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York. I would love to see you there along with Scotty the Medium. It is a weekend of talks and paranormal investigating. My first trip to the Shanley. I'm looking forward to being there. I hope you will join us. All right, we are back. Joining me again on the program, the author of this book right here. And in case you're not watching, you're listening, it's A Life with Ghosts. Steve Gonsalves is with us, and you recognize him from Ghost Hunters, from Ghost Nation, from Ghost Hunters Academy, and back where he belongs, Ghost Hunters, which can now be seen on Discovery and on the Max streaming service. Steve, I want to talk a little bit about your documentaries here in the next segment as well. But as we're kind of rounding out and dealing with the book, share one of your favorite paranormal stories, if you would, that you put in the book. Maybe even one that nobody's familiar with yet.
Wow, Dave, that's a great question.
I come up with them on occasion.
Yes. Actually, something is in the book that happened. We go into some other things, like some emotional things that have happened that people don't quite know or don't understand that happens because it's caught off camera. They don't often show the emotion that some of us, feel and go through. But when it comes to scary and like the stories of paranormal, there is a place in the Berkshires called Bucksteep Manor, and we did investigate it. The TAPS team did once, but Tango and I actually went there alone one time, and we experienced some phenomena that I don't know how to explain. And it had to do with voices coming out of thin air, as loud as you could imagine, right in our faces, 360, and pots and pans clanking and ladles falling, and just a really intense thing that uh, you know we're super lucky in the respect that me, Tango, Jason, the paranormal doesn't scare us in that way, uh,
Mhm.
but this, I mean, it honestly did. Tango and I kind of huddled onto each other and ran through that place. And that's the honest truth. Like, I remember Tango just looking back at me and going, "Go, go." And I had my head in his, and buried into his shoulder. And Dave, I tell you, it really was really, really crazy. And to the
It
point where
sounds like
Tango and I,
something from a horror movie that you're describing. What's it like to actually be in that moment and know this isn't special effects, this isn't drug or alcohol induced. You're not just hearing somebody tell you a crazy story. You're now in that crazy story.
Dave, I don't know how to explain it. Tango and I, we always have to even like uh, check ourselves, like sit down and talk about it and relive it and make sure that we're not like exaggerating it over time. And it was exactly that. It was so loud in there that we couldn't hear each other talking. We literally had to be like, "Go this way, go through here, like what's happening?" It
Wow.
was really crazy. And as much as I wish it was televised, as much as I wish even we had a way to record it, there's something special about it where it was just, two friends having this experience of a lifetime, and it's something that he and I can really just share. But I go into full depth in, that is in the book, and that to me is well, obviously you asked me to say something, but to me that is one that nobody knows, honestly. We don't really talk about it because we always say that nobody would ever believe it, but it happened. It happened to us. It was awesome.
Got a question here from the crowd. They say, "Wonder how many times ghosts have followed Steve home." That comes from Kathy. What about that? I know that's the number one question I get. Are you afraid that something's going to attach you? Have you ever had something follow you home? What do you say?
I haven't. No, not that I know of. I'm not sure we are really familiar with what their interpretation of time and space is. So
Mhm.
say I've acquired a haunted item. Like any one of these. There are a few behind me, and I've had it for 10 years. Well, nothing's happened, but maybe their interpretation is just a few seconds. Who knows? It may be nothing.
Mhm.
I don't know. It may not be linear as we experience it here in this. We'll just call it the physical world that we see. I don't really know, but if it is, then I've never had anything follow me home. No, and I have a lot of things that I have skulls right next to me, skeletons behind me. I have all kinds of things that haunted swords and and never anything. But I'm glad because I wouldn't want, quite honestly, I wouldn't want anything here. It
Right.
sounds like it would be fun and awesome, but people who are going through a haunting, especially one that lasts for a long time, it's hard for them to really maintain uh, uh, relationships and friendships, and hard to maintain a job, and they really
Mhm.
struggle. And it sounds silly to say it's like Poltergeist, but if you think about it, in the beginning, the dad he's with his friends. They're watching the game. They're having fun. He's selling real estate. He's at the top of his game. His having fun with his family. His kids love him. At the end of the movie, even by the middle of the movie, he hasn't shaved. He's in a house coat. He doesn't work in the real estate anymore. That's over with. And at the end of the house, at the end of the movie, his house implodes. It's like, it's not always fun. As a matter of fact, most people who live in a real haunted house have a real hard time with it. Some people do love it, though. I know a few people who are like, we're fine with it.
See, honey, it's just because the house is haunted. That's why I'm not shaving and not wearing pants. It's because the house is haunted. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Now I have a good answer to give her. Nikki Flores says, Steve, did you have a hard time narrowing down what stories you would put in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a few things that stuck out to me. One was that if there was an experience during it that I felt like I was using it in my own life, like ways of
Mhm.
thinking, especially through the history. Like don't do that because it didn't work out for her, or do
Right.
that because it did work out for him. Because we, through the history, just what we're investigating, there are a lot of trials and tribulations that other people have gone through that we can certainly learn from. And also other things like, things where it has worked out for people, and just ways that people have carried themselves. But that was, of course, a true, real, awesome experience in terms of the paranormal. Uh, a place that I thought had that struck me emotionally, made it into the book. For instance, Alexandria Zoo, where that haunting has to do with love and devotion and caring, and not necessarily, something disastrous or grisly.
Mhm.
Um, and there are some stories like that in there as well. And then there are places that were just obvious, like a lot of things happened to me at Waverly Hills. That's going in there, but it's not a haunted location book by any means.
Right.
I just like to put it at the place because that's where the experience happened to me, and I did want to showcase the history. No, most people do know the history of a lot of these places, but I wanted to really focus on the people and the stories, and really honor the fact that we're getting these ghosts and we're running for them and we're trying to find them. But these were people, that had loves and lives and losses, and have gone through tragedy, and have done a lot of things. We need to remember that. And there is a little
Agreed.
bit of that in there as well. So if all of those things sort of lined up, then it went into the book.
Did you get done with the book, turn it in, and then go, oh, that story? Why didn't I put in that story? Do you have enough for book number 2 already, Steve? You could tell us.
Yeah, I mean, not that there's plans to, but we could do volumes, quite honestly, because those things, the emotional stuff is not as plentiful as some of the others. It's not always that you're able to connect a lost loved one to somebody. It's not always that somebody affects you in such a deep way that you sit around at night and think about them, that sort of thing. Um, but everything else, yeah, plenty.
Before I go to the next question, you say that it cracks me up. I was doing an investigation once. We were in this private home, and the woman had left the home. The older woman knew people were renting the home out. They were having a lot of activity. They kept seeing an old man that would be in one room and then in the other and then gone. And I went in, we were doing an EVP, and we had a medium with us, and I was doing an EVP session. And I'm like, I can't remember his name. Let's call him Roger. I'm like, Roger, your wife, she's left the house. Is there a message you want us to pass on to her? And the EVP came back and said, oh, hell no. So he was done. He wanted nothing to do with her, it appeared. He was just going to stay. He was glad she was finally out of the house and he had the run of the joint to himself again. So it is funny that not all ghost stories end up with, tell her where the keys to the safety deposit box or the map to the hidden treasure, or tell her I'll love her. Is there a message? No. Don't even tell her you saw me. Aaron Higgins.
A long time.
Aaron Higgins says, I love how you bring the history info into the cases. And Steve, do you have a favorite piece of equipment that you use?
Thank you. Yes, history is awesome and super fascinating and fun and very enriching. I think when I learn about history, it really makes me feel a lot better about the cases and everything. I love it. Favorite piece of equipment? I always go to like infrared camera or thermal. To me, that's really valuable for a lot of reasons. One, you can record everything that you can see in the visible spectrum, which is awesome. Now you add IR, you can record everything you can see in the visible spectrum and the infrared spectrum. You add full spectrum, which I don't mean to say none of them are really full, as you know, but as many as they can get there. Then you could see now in all these other spectrums as well, and then you can also have the possibility of catching EVPs because you're recording audio or disembodied sounds, and I like that. And it doesn't have to always be at night, as we all know. We investigate during the day. All of us have, and all of us do. So the IR is a little tricky, but you can use it in the daytime. But you really have to dial that in quite especially because you get that bloom effect where it just blows out everything because too much light is coming in.
Right.
It can ruin your camera, absolutely, and your eyes. Quite honestly, that. But yeah, I like that. I think.
All right. Amy Wise Nichols helps us step into the next phase of this interview. She says, the house in between was awesome. Can we expect more like it in the future? So maybe there are people that are not familiar with the house in between, which is a film by Steve. As a matter of fact, he is in the series, but he also directs and is involved on it in more of a production and directorial debut. And Steve, do you mind if we show the trailer for the house in between?
Oh gosh, I mean, yeah, please, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Believe in what?
It's not an old house. It's built in the 1990s. You would never think there was anything really going on inside the house.
I remember coming home from work, deadbolting the door and going upstairs, and as soon as I got upstairs, we heard bang! I looked out and the door was open, but it had the deadbolt still sticking out.
There's a lot of things that happen in this house that we can't explain.
There's something there that lets you know it's there.
It's wild just being there.
It has this aura about it, of mystery.
We have a DVR system that is filming the house 24 hours a day.
It can go from 0 to 60 in this house quick. It can be just quiet and everything's fine, and then boom.
It's been 10 years and she hasn't slept in the house. I could just tell how much this house scared her. We need to get her back. It's time to step in and bring it to the next level.
Interesting. This I don't. I'm not sure. It's kind of a complicated question to be answered simply.
Without it being a complete hoax, how would you explain something like this?
Something's happening that I can't explain. Supernatural, natural, that's what we're trying to figure out.
I'm 100% certain that it was the spirit of somebody in this house. There's no thinking to it. It was for sure.
Give this some kind of physical sign that you're in the house and you can hear our voice.
This is the evidence that we've been waiting to get.
It's a real life mystery, and it's incredible.
My stomach just got tied with knots.
You're looking at something else.
We're going to talk more about the documentary and its follow-up, The House in Between 2. We'll do that right after this. Innovation, creation, vitality, and joy are the pulse of mysoultopia.com, with many custom creations for the mind, body, and spirit, along with classes, intuitive sessions, coaching, and healing energies. MySoultopia.com strives to bring sophistication with a twist to the metaphysical and the holistic market, while raising the community's vibration and channeling the new paradigm, which means new and exciting adventures for all. MySoultopia.com is utopia for your soul. Visit MySoultopia.com, your one-stop shop for all your metaphysical needs, offering hand-selected crystals and crystal jewelry with prices to fit every budget. MySoultopia.com offers the best selections of tarot and divination cards by top designers, expertly curated and award-winning book collections from top authors on every subject you'll need on your spiritual journey. MySoultopia is also proud to offer the finest singing bowls and an eclectic collection of the most amazing gemstones, crystals, and crystal jewelry from the top metaphysical designers in the world. MySoultopia.com is always your one-stop shop for award-winning mixes of Florida water, sage spray, and other spiritual protection. So begin your journey with the best resource, MySoultopia.com. That's MySoultopia.com. Why mess with the rest when you can start with the best? MySoultopia.com. Again, that's MySoultopia.com.
Haunted Magazine, issue 38, Hot Summer Frights, is an electrifying edition that will send shivers down your spine. Dive into a world where history and mystery, the normal and the paranormal, intertwine. In the latest edition, we look at the Hell House hauntings, the terror of the Warminster Thing, the Borley Rectory, sin eating in Shropshire, and just what the heck is the Grampus? You can find our magazine at the website hauntedmagazineprintshop.com and selected outlets in the UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States. So grab your copy today. And remember, kids, don't be normal, be paranormal.
All right, we are back. Real quickly, my friends, I've just got a disturbing message. A good friend of ours in the paranormal, Scott Grunwald, is in the hospital in Temecula Valley needing prayers. He has an artery blockage that connects the blood flow and oxygen to the brain. He'll be needing a surgery tomorrow, emergency surgery to prevent a massive stroke. This is very serious. So if you could please keep our good friend Scott Grunwald in your prayers and send him positive energy, healing, Reiki, whatever you've got. Scott Grunwald in California. All right. Sorry to interrupt with that, Steve. We try to make sure that we pass on information for those brothers and sisters in the paranormal field that we've worked with. You've had a lot of experience, of course, in front of the camera with Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters Academy and Ghost Nation. you decided to take a case that was very important. What, 10 years of research and activity in this house, and you decided to bring it forward in a film called The House in Between. For people that are not familiar with this and the sequel, which is out now, The House in Between Part 2, what can you tell us about this case?
It was that a 10-year study. What happened is a woman named Alice Jackson built her dream house in Mississippi and couldn't live in it. Saw things that terrified her. Other people saw things in there that terrified them. She refused to sleep in the house and opened it up to investigators. And for 10 years, they studied in that house. And I'd never seen that before, where there was a not controlled. There is no such thing as a controlled environment when you're
Right.
dealing. You can't be in a house, and consider that. But a controlled environment in the respect that it was not lived in and just monitored 24 hours a day by a paranormal team for 10 years.
Wow.
Brad and John and the gang over there were going in all the time. They had 24-hour surveillance there, investigating it, and they felt like over time that the house was sort of maybe even learning how to communicate back, and all that I thought was so fascinating. And
Wait, as though the house was becoming a sentient being of its own.
not necessarily that. I don't think anybody there thought the house was coming alive. I think they got the feeling that whatever was there was learning how to use the house as a way to communicate. For
Okay.
instance,
All right.
maybe it realized it can do certain things, and you know, and over time they would not coach it, but say, hey, maybe and focus on one thing, and then they would see it eventually start to happen. And I hadn't heard of that sort of, and I thought all that was fascinating. But one thing I liked is that Alice was just wanted answers. She didn't care how it came, and she was doing things on her own, like calling people to come and check the level in her house because things were moving and sliding around. She would try to talk to scientists and get real answers. They would just hang up on her, of course. But yeah, that's why I decided to. And the way the town was perceiving her, here we are in this day and age, and she was still sort of, everybody loved her, and you could tell. Um, but I think there was some chatter, probably, hey,
Right.
she thinks her house is haunted, and I think it bothered her a little bit, and you could see that in the documentary. And one thing I love about it is, and she'll say this, she went from uh, maybe hearing whispers behind her back to people stopping her in the town and like wanting to take pictures with her, and like now she's kind of like, and
Local
yeah, great
celebrity, huh?
people. Yeah, I think so. For good or bad. Yeah,
Mhm.
um, yeah. So we were able to line up some physicists and different scientists and other investigators and even a psychic we had go into the house, and yeah, we got some answers there. It was quite an experience. Kendall Welton, who was the director of photography and co-director, and man, did we have a blast working on that together.
And watching the trailers is astounding. There is a lot of activity that you were able to capture, document, and share throughout this documentary. It's surprising though, right? Because this is a relatively new house. And were you able to uncover, without giving too much away, why you believe it might be haunted? Or is that still kind of the jury's out on as to why? But the question is more, how is it haunted and what do we do to deal with it?
Yeah, great question, Dave. In part one, by the end of it, we did have a good sense, maybe, um, but nothing really conclusive. Quite honestly, by the end of part one, although an amazing documentary and really a heartfelt, and everybody really latched onto it, luckily.
Mhm.
But it's not like by the end of it, she was back in the house and we got, everything was solved. She still, there was no way, Um, so I knew, my job wasn't done there. And whether or not at this point, whether or not we were going to do another documentary, I was still going to investigate the house and continue to work with the team to help. But the first one, we're very lucky that the first one did quite well, and the opportunity to do a second one was there. So we were able to get a geophysicist and really, spend time there. And quite honestly, the geophysicist still goes to the house on her own, and they've become friends. She still continues her research there. It's really, really cool.
Steve, what do you think of the fact that we're also trained, especially by Hollywood and the writings of Charles Dickens and so many other horror movie and horror authors, that the hauntings are these pieces of our past that refuse to stay silent? What do you think about the fact that maybe the hauntings are yet to come, that what we're seeing are reflections of something traumatic in time that play out 20 years from now, and the ripple is just hitting our time era now?
Oh, Dave Schrader, my gosh. That is about as deep of a question as you can. That seems so fascinating. I'm not sure in my personal research that I've seen any sort of pattern that would suggest that. But I mean, if time isn't linear, then how could that not be possible? Or if we do believe that, and if time isn't linear, then maybe you can, maybe move that timeline, and the future can be now or before. That's really quite.
Well, it's quantum entanglement, right? It's that spooky action at a
Yeah.
distance. Maybe not necessarily distance being, Boston to Minnesota, but distance being 2023 to 2067. And there's something impacting. I mean, it seems that something is left behind. So I often wonder then, why does it have to be left behind from our past or even our present? I think a lot of things we're haunting ourselves in some instances. The sounds we may hear may be us being replayed. And until you remove that pawn from the board and say, well, dad's dead now, when we hear that, it must be a ghost. How did that residual know to tune in at that moment and begin to play out? That's why I believe it's probably always been there, but it's the dog's cat, it's dad, it's mom, it's Steve. We always have an excuse for it until one of those cogs of the wheel are now missing. But, and I get where you're going with the fact that a lot of the stuff in the research we do is in investigating the past, trying to put a name to the spirits, a name to the history to understand, so that we can, almost like a demonologist calling out the name of the demon, to help you extract it and understand it better. And not that I want to equate a haunting to the demonic, but it's something I'm trying to just give people that have watched those kind of movies and shows maybe a little bit of a better grasp on. It is interesting that there are reflections. Waverly Hills, you mentioned earlier. We would hear these stories of Waverly when it was a fully functioning hospital. It was known to be haunted, but that's because possibly tens of thousands of people died there with tuberculosis and as an elderly care home. And there were cases or stories of nurses that were on staff that would round the corner and see people standing there, and she would run. And while we were there on one of our first investigations, this female apparition appeared in front of us and took off running like she was scared senseless. And I thought in that moment, who's haunting who? Did she just step into that nexus where 2008 bled through to 1958 and she saw us, we saw her? Neither of us are dead, but it's a time slip moment as opposed to dealing with dead people.
Yes, I mean, I can certainly make sense of that in the respect that it makes sense. But if the science makes sense, I don't know. But I feel like if you can believe, like you said, quantum entanglement, if you can believe that energy never had an origin and will never die, then maybe it is all connected and not in a linear fashion. I don't think anybody can say certainly yes or no to that. I think it's fascinating, and I would love to sit around and talk about it for days. It's really a cool thought, quite honestly.
And it's interesting too that so many hauntings will happen where there are opposing mirrors, which, right, is the prismatic sense of light and the sense of visual somehow compressed into these moments that will always be captured like Insta photos. I love the stuff. I love that you guys helped engage the world with Ghost Hunters coming out. There were shows that predated you, of course, and none did it as well as Ghost Hunters when it came out. And it locked the imagination of millions of viewers around the world. It continues to do so. Steve, you are truly one of, and I say this to everybody I meet, you are truly one of the nicest guys in the field, one of the most genuine, passionate paranormal investigators. And I hope everybody will get your book, A Life with Ghosts. And do me a favor, folks, don't just buy the book, rate and review it. Because the more you rate and review books like this on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com or wherever you buy it, the higher it goes up so that more and more people see this. And more books like this should be in the hands of people that are budding paranormal investigators and seasoned veterans so that they get a better handle and understanding on what they think they see on TV and to get to know the players behind the characters that you see on these shows. Because the book is fantastic, and it does certainly open you up, I think, Steve, to a totally different way of looking at the guy that we see, who's this affable, intelligent, fun investigator who has compassion for the spirit realm and the humans that dwell there. So thanks for the work that you continue to do, and please pass our best on to the team.
I will. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's always a
Always,
blast to talk to you. I can't wait to see you, and thank you so much.
We'll see you together in Michigan at the Michigan Paracon. You guys can find more information at miparacon.com. Well, my friends, as I always say, I hope that the darkness is just a little bit more light with the information that we share on these shows, that we're able to inspire you to question things, to investigate things on your own. And there are good people out there in this field, and there are leaders in this field that should be, and I'm glad to say are finally being heard from on their own merits, not just as tied to a team, but for the thoughts that they bring to programs and projects like this. So please make sure to pick up a copy of that book. And I will be back Wednesday. Chachi and I will be delivering the news, as we often do. It'll be just the two of us, and we may dip more into creepy things kids say. So I hope you'll check that out as well, live Wednesday, right here. And for those of you listening to the audio, you'll get it Thursday. Thank you very much. Stay safe, rate and review this show. And for those of you watching live, hit that like button before you leave and treat yourself. Hit the bell and make sure that you alert yourself to every brand new episode that comes out of the very best in paranormal talk radio. I'm Dave Schrader. Welcome to my realm. This is my Paranormal 60. This house is clean.